Hello lovelies and welcome to a new process video. I have a 12 by 12 layout for you today, and this would have to be one of my absolute most favourite layouts I've ever done. I mean, I adore this photo, so I think that has something to do with it. This is a picture of Koopy pulling a face on my car window when I'd pulled up, and it's just so him, and I really wanted to scrap this one. And you know me, I love my mixed media scrapbooking, but I've felt lately that it just seems to be the same all the time. It's always using ink, and it follows the same recipe basically. And I wanted to try something a little different, and I absolutely adore the way this layout turned out. So to start with, I got some of my Dylusions paints out. Now I really wanted to work with the turquoise and the teal, but obviously it didn't match my photo, so I went with my London Blue. But my London Blue is very well loved, and there's not much of it left, and it's starting to dry up. So I didn't think I was going to be able to work, but in the end I get a good result. So I'm going to have to definitely restock that one up. So I'm adding a lot of water because I didn't want to paint on my background, but I didn't want to ink and package technique my background. What I wanted to do was a bit of a mix of both. So I wanted to use some paint, and I wanted to splodge it on the background, knowing that it was going to be like just the first layer of my background. So I really wanted to work on building up a mixed media background layer by layer. So I wanted to add stamping and stenciling and all sorts of things to make this a little different. So I'm just blending a few of those brush marks in with a wet one, and then I'm going to dry my layer. So I do a fair amount of splatters, not big ones, just little ones with my brush. But pretty much every colour I use except black, I go back and add splatters of that same colour. So I use a mix of Dylusions paints, scribble sticks, what else? Gesso, all different kinds of mediums. So yeah, it's a good process. I absolutely adore this layout. I love the way it turned out. So it's definitely something I'm going to have to do more often. I want to add some stenciling onto this as well, but I didn't want to go bold with black. So I grabbed my stencil, and at first I was going to use some of the periwinkle blue. In the end, I don't add any other blue to this. So what I do is, now this was dry, I heat set this with my heat gun, so it doesn't work as well as it would have if the paint was still wet. Now this is called ghosting or reduction basically. So I've got my stencil and I've got a wet one, and I'm just pulling some of that paint back up through my stencil with my wet one. Now if this paint was wet, this would have worked a lot better, and that stencil imprint would have been a lot more noticeable. But I had heat set it and then I thought of this technique, so that's why it's not very noticeable on the video. It is a little more noticeable on the layout, but it just adds another layer to it. So then I decided to come back in with some gesso and add some white through this stencil. Now I'm making sure to not just go on the blue, to pull it to the corners of the layout, so it doesn't look like I've just got floating bits of stencil flying around on the layout. It's good to anchor those to either another portion of stenciling or to a corner or something like that, so it doesn't look like you have floating blobs on your page. This is another colour, so I'm adding more splatters. I've just added a bit of water to my gesso, got my fan brush and just done some tiny splatters all over the place. Next I'm going to do some stamping. This was a new stamp set I got just this week actually, and I loved the images on it, especially the circles, so I really wanted to give them a go. So I pull out my archival ink, and I was going to just ink it up and stamp it. Then I remembered, hang on, I have scribble sticks that I'm trying to use much more often. It's a product I love, but I'm hoarding, so I'm trying to step away from that. I'm not scared of it, I'm scared of using it up, which is silly because I can just buy more. So I'm trying hard to use more of my mixed media supplies, and I love this technique. If you haven't done something like this yet, give it a try. You'll be amazed at how it works. So basically I'm using the scribble sticks to ink up my stamp, and it turns out amazing. You get a beautiful watercolory look when you do this. So basically what I've done is I've put some water on my craft sheet, and I'm using that to activate my scribble stick. So it is a dry crayon. When you add water, basically it's a pigment stick. If you haven't used these scribble sticks before, it is just a stick of dried up paint basically. It's very pigmented. When you add water, you get a watercolory painty look. So if you dip the end in water and then apply it to your stamp, it's going to put basically a wet paint. It's going to ink up your stamp beautifully, and then when you apply it to a layout or something, It gives you a beautiful effect. It's one of my favorites. So this colour is Night. Night is one of my absolute favourite colours at the moment. I love the Dina Wakley's Night. It's a dark blue, so it's a great colour to use in place of black when you want like a dark neutral, but you don't want something too bold. And I just love it. I love that it's got that purple undertone, so it's a beautiful colour. And again, I got my fan brush and added some splatters. So basically every colour I use, I just go back in and throw a few splatters on the page because I just love splatters. Another stamp in this little stamp set that I got, it's one of the Tim Holtz that comes with the stencil. And there was this little black star, there was this little bold full star. So I decided to ink that up with the black scribble stick and just throw that on the page here and there. And I do some double stamping, so I'll get a solid, a darker one and a lighter one. So it gives me varying shades of black basically. I don't actually go back and do splatters in this one because I didn't want to bring too much black into it. I wanted these little pops of black. And then I clean up my ink, but then I clean up my scribble stick, but then I decide to add one more stamp in this black just to give it something else black but not too much. So there's another stamp, it's like a honeycomb pattern in this stamp set. So I decided to just put this on there just in a few places in the middle just to give it something to ground that photo to. And so my background definitely took the longest out of this entire process. I think in all it might have taken me about a half hour. I've only sped this up once, but I have cut out a lot of the heat drying and things like that. But this is basically my background. I adore this background. It is one of my absolute favourites. So I still get my mixed metery effect, but there's much more detail in it than usual. It's not just paint and just ink. I love the detail in this layout. So I wanted to map my photo on something, but I didn't have any white paper handy, but what I did have was baking paper. I love using baking paper, especially my junk journals. Haven't used it on a scrapbook layout until today, but I love the look it gives. It's translucent enough that you can still, it doesn't take away from that background. I do 2 layers, I double layer it, and I love the texture of it. It adds another element to this layout, so I'm really happy that I chose to use this. It's not as clean and crisp as a white cardstock would be, but it does separate the photo from that background. So yeah, look at your supplies and see what you've got. Don't be afraid to try something new. So baking paper was definitely something new for me on a layout. Use it in my junk journals all the time. Not on a layout, but I love the effect it's given. So it's just helped that photo separate from the background, but it hasn't taken away from my awesome background. So I'm going to get some foam now because I want to pop this photo up just to pop it off that background a little more. And I'm just using some double-sided tape. Something, if you've never used craft foam before, tape runners don't like foam. They don't work. So I just use my double-sided tape and use a fair amount of that. And then I'm going to attach this to the layout. So I don't do a lot of embellishing, obviously, because I've done so much on this background. And I started the day when I went to scrapbook. I knew I wanted to do a scrapbook layout for today's video, but it ended up being the third thing I did today in my art room. I spent the morning making DIY embellishments, and this was one of them. When I made this one, I knew it would be perfect for this layout with the pops of blue and the white. And I find it to be a very addictive process. When you start doing something like that, you just keep going, you can't stop. And that's what happened this morning. I got my die cutting machine out, I cut a whole bunch of shapes, and I ended up, with a whole bunch. So I made a bunch of DIY embellishments when really I only wanted something for this layout. So yeah, that's how I spent my morning. It's actually a picture of it on my Instagram. If you're interested, go check that out. So for my title, I knew I wanted to use some of the word thickers that we get. I have so many, and I really want to use them more. And I just so happened to find one of the white sets, and I wanted to go with Beautiful Crazy You, but because of where I've placed my photo, Beautiful just wasn't really going to fit. In the end, I went with Crazy You, and it fits this photo perfectly because he is my crazy, beautiful boy. And I just love this. And another thing, when I was making those DIY embellishments, I saw a phrase in the Tim Holtz Chit Chat book, Small Talk, and it said, if you're lucky enough to be different, never change. And I thought that would be absolutely perfect for this photo. So I went back through and I found that and got that out. And yeah, I'm using that as my title and as my journaling as well. So what I do have to do is I have to go back and get the date for this page. But all in all, that's pretty much all I'm going to do. I draw a hand-drawn border around the side. Sometimes I find it just helps ground the layout and stops everything looking like it's just going to float off or run off the page. And I just love the rustic and textury look it gives to a mixed media background. So that's it for my layout. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I sure enjoyed making it. This is one of my absolute favorite layouts, as I've said, and I just love the way it turned out. So thanks for watching, and I'll be back in a few days with a new video. Bye for now.